Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Open Source, a place where you get to chat with great people, have fun, and learn all about the things they're doing in the open source community. Today, I'm super excited because today my guest is my friend Cam Soper. Say hello, Cam.
Hey everybody.
Awesome. So, Cam, everybody
hmm
kind of knows you for the home automation stuff, right? But can you tell us what your actual job is?
Wait, I have a job? Oh, yeah, I think I do.
Allegedly. Allegedly.
Allegedly. So I am on the documentation team that deals with all things .NET. There's actually the team actually is kind of split. Like half the team works on ASP.NET stuff, and the other half of the team works on like .NET Core all up. And I'm somewhere off in kind of this other area that gets to kind of do all the above because I was kind of a I got added to the team as a reorg. So I brought on this content that came along with me, and I get kind of the feeling that nobody knew what to do with me. So I'm just kind of sitting off by myself, and I get to work on ASP.NET docs, and I get to work on .NET Core docs, and then I've got Azure docs, and my good friend Scott Addy and I, we write a lot of Microsoft Learn modules together. So like most of the .NET related Microsoft Learn modules, particularly the microservices .NET uh, Learn modules, those were all written by Scott Addy and me.
I mean, you say your friend Scott Addy. I don't know if you would admit that I'm his friend as well.
hmm
But so I know. So you work on docs, and docs are very near and dear to my heart because that's how I kind of got started in the open source space. Um, I was having a conversation with our shared mutual friend Scott, and he was talking about this is before he joined Microsoft and before I joined Microsoft, and he was just talking about the fact that he was an MVP and how he was contributing to all this stuff, and it was great because he actually felt like he was doing things instead of just working for some company and writing software, and he was in the process of figuring out if he wanted to join Microsoft or not. And when I had this conversation with him, I was very much like what our some of our friends would call like black matter or backroom developers, right? Like the
hmm
developer who just does their job. Um, it's fulfilling, but not quite fulfilling, and they just kind of go about their business. I was one of those. I was using Stack Overflow. I was using basically every thing that existed out there and not contributing back. And I just decided to just start giving back. So I started contributing to docs, and that's kind of how I got started. Um, and I think that docs are very near and dear to my heart, like I said. And yeah, I've met some
They're,
cool people along the way.
they're very, of course, documentation is very important, and I take a lot of pride in what I do with documentation. But here's the dark, dirty secret: I don't like writing documentation. I really
Okay,
don't.
sure, sure,
I consider myself an engineer, right?
yeah,
Um, it, and I much prefer to be writing code rather than writing prose. Writing prose
yeah,
is the thing that I do because my job description calls for it.
sure,
But what I really like about my job is where it puts me kind of adjacent to all this cool stuff going on in Microsoft, right?
hmm,
I get to touch a lot of cool Azure stuff. I get to hang out with, a lot of the cool like developer advocates and community people. Like just the other day, I was in a meeting with Scott Hanselman, and this is something that happens kind of frequently. But as someone who
yeah,
came from outside Microsoft years ago, who has been learning and watching Scott Hanselman, learning from and watching Scott Hanselman, it's kind of like this weird. Um, I don't know what to say. It's kind of like you can't believe that you've reached the point in your career
yeah.
that, oh yeah, having a meeting with this guy, that's just like, oh, that happens all the time.
Oh, I mean, we can stroke each other's egos all day long. I think like I have a very similar um experience as you. I think we both kind of started in similar roles at Microsoft, and then we came into. Well, first off, we were outside of Microsoft, probably thinking, that I'll never work there. And then you worked at Microsoft in a space where you didn't have access to these sort of people, and then you eventually have a job, but you have access to these people. I jokingly say, because of my job, like my job involves like keynotes and event stuff, right? So I'm talking with all sorts of people that I have no interest in talking to. So yeah, no, I definitely feel. the, you know, I the cliche like pinch myself like this isn't a thing. But occasionally I'll be sitting there. I'm like, so this is my job.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't really like not in a, like it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's like this is my like it's very confusing. When I tell people what my job is, they think it's way more crazy than I think it is. Right? My
Right.
people like people when I talk about my job, they're like, oh my gosh, like you're doing all this stuff. I'm like, no, no, it's like it's very still corporate environment. There's still lots of. I'm just not off flying around doing whatever I want. Some people at Microsoft get the luxury to do that, but not
Mm-hmm.
everybody.
Yeah.
So, I think that to to talk about kind of your experience with open source. So, do
Mm-hmm.
you remember the first time that you came across open source or you saw something that was quote unquote open source or free software, whatever term you want to use?
Sure. So, actually, I remember it very well because it was something I got in trouble for a lot at a previous job. So I backing up. Let me give a little history about my career. My career is a little unusual in that my professional software career started when I was 12 years old.
Hmm.
So I grew up in the middle of Missouri here in the U.S. In a very rural area. If anybody knows Missouri, I grew up at the Lake of the Ozarks, which is, if you look at a map of Missouri, it's pretty much dead center. And um, a very rural area, very tourist driven economy, and a lot of small businesses. And um, one day, a local computer consultant who caters to all these small businesses comes to the middle school, the local middle school, and says, "I'm looking to take on an apprentice."
Ooh,
And I had a little bit of a reputation among the staff at the school for being a bit of a computer nerd. I was
sure.
12 years old, and I had shown off some really cool batch files that I'd written to like it was a hard drive compression scheme that I'd written in batch files with PK-zip, right? Because
Oh,
this is DOS 3.3. This is like 1990, and so my name came up, and this guy recruited me as basically his apprentice. So I worked for him all through. Let me see, that was eighth grade. So eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade, all the way through 12th grade, then through college. Um, Basically, I was his maintenance developer. So if stuff broke, he sent it to me.
cool.
Um, Starting at 12 years old, I started um, getting paid to write code. Um, Unfortunately, after college, he didn't have enough work to employ me full time. He said he would. He said, don't worry about finding a job. You'll be fine. I have all this work." And I graduated and there's no work. And um, I was behind on house payments. I was behind on all kinds of stuff. And I got contacted by a headhunter who said, "You need to come to Kansas City and go to work for this large regional bank in Kansas City." So I did. I was there for 7 years. And it was while I was there that I really kind of grew into myself as a developer, really started to learn how enterprises work and how, like development works as a team sport rather than just two guys, in the middle of Missouri somewhere. And I remember there were a lot of open source tools that I would latch onto, some of which I learned from. So I worked in the online banking area at this bank. I was the lead developer for online banking, and it was funny coincidence, maybe not coincidence, maybe actually contributed to my career. The company that sold us the online banking platform was actually the company where Scott Hanselman was chief software architect at the time. And so I had worked a lot with them over the years, and they had shown me a lot of their tool chain, things like Log4Net, right? God, what was the like the first big .NET DevOps thing? Cruise Control.net. Yeah. See, yeah.
No,
Note of
I
recognition there.
remember cruise control. Like I was a cruise control expert. I like it was awesome. Anyway, I interrupt you.
So
Keep going.
no. So all these pieces of the tool chain there were really my first exposure to open source, right?
Yeah.
And I would start bringing these things into like our other projects and stuff, and I would get fingers wagged at me. Oh, you didn't have that go through the open source approval committee and things like that. But
Ooh, yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm trying to get stuff done, whatever. Um, I did. Different story for a different time. I almost got fired from that job a couple of times. The
Hey,
only reason I
that's cool.
didn't was because because they needed me actually.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I got busted once for unauthorized software on my machine, and that was a finger wagging moment. The firing moment was a personnel thing, and that we'll come back to that story offline, Isaac.
Okay. Well, I've been terminated as well. So my story probably isn't as interesting as yours. So I want to pause. There's a lot of things to unpack there.
Okay.
The first thing you said, so you're from a small town in Missouri, Lake of the Ozarks. I'm very surprised you didn't get into the money laundering business. Um, that's probably something that a joke that you hear every day, right?
Honestly, surprisingly, I've had to introduce a lot of people to that show. So you're referring to Ozark on Netflix,
Hmm.
which is actually set at the Lake of the Ozarks. And in the very first season, they filmed, I don't know, maybe about, I don't know how many scenes they filmed there, but when I watched the first season, there were like 3 shots that were actually filmed at the lake. Most of that show is not filmed in Missouri at all. It's filmed
Yep.
in Georgia because they get
Sure.
tax breaks.
Yep. Of course. Yeah. I just like whenever I hear Ozarks, I immediately think, uh, amazing show. Anyway.
So the actual lake, just for the
Yep.
viewers' edification, the actual lake is much more commercial than that. They show you this nice placid lake with
Yeah. One or two
marinas
small
spread around
businesses.
here,
Yeah.
houses spread around here, 1 or 2 businesses there. No, 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 no. The actual lake is like the shoreline. All 500 miles of shoreline are just lined with docks, people, personal docks that
Yeah.
are owned by people and businesses, and it's really it's just picture your favorite tourist trap location, and that's
Yeah.
really what the lake is.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. No, I could only imagine. Like tourist areas don't actually look like a tourist area looks like a tourist area, right? Like whether
Hmm.
there's hotels or whether there's people trying to sell their wares or whatever, right? Like there's no like completely like ice. I guess like maybe like the desert. I guess that's a tourist area and there's some isolation there, but not even that
Hmm.
much anymore. So one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting is you said that you started, mucking around with computers, like you were writing batch scripts and things like that, and that's very funny because I started something similar, right? So my friends and I we wrote a VB script that opened and closed one of our teachers' disk trays.
Oh no.
So like every 45 minutes it would open his disk tray. And it's funny because like the first time he was like, "Oh, that's strange." The second time he's like, "Oh, that's strange." Third time he knew exactly what was going on. Like because obviously like we're teenagers and we're like trying really hard not to laugh because we have no ability to hide our emotions. And
Hmm.
yeah, no, that was fun. We didn't get in trouble. Like he was a cool. The only reason why I did is because he was a cool teacher.
Hmm.
But yeah, there was definitely like a fix this now, and then yeah. But no, that was it's funny because I think a lot of people start in very similar tracks, right? Like I've had a lot of these discussions, and a lot of people are they're kind of one or two sides. Like I was a tinkerer, and I used to take stuff apart all the time. Like there's those kind of people, and
Hmm.
I just kind of developed into tech, and then obviously software became a thing. And there's people that were like, my parents were in software. I was very interested in it. I got books. I got a computer early, and then I just went at it. So it sounds like you're kind of like a hybrid of the two, right? Where an opportunity was presented to you, like you mentioned the apprenticeship, and you just kind of clung on to that. So,
Hmm.
you know, when you're doing that work, right? So, do you remember? I imagine you probably built a lot of, I guess, customer related skills in that vein, or not so
Hmm.
much.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
he used to send me in front of customers all the time. Which, I
yeah.
mean, between the ages, I mean, he couldn't really send me in front of customers, before I was 16 because I couldn't
A
get there
13-year
because I
old
could.
boy go to this random person's house, right?
Well, not just that, but I couldn't drive, right? And there's no
Yeah,
public
sure.
transportation, in the middle of Missouri. So, so yeah, when I got to be 16, which I was actually a senior in high school when I was 16. So the ages, traditional ages
Hashtag
and
humble
like
brag.
grade levels, yeah, they don't really line up. So I was younger than most of my peers, but yeah, he started sending me to customers. Usually it was stuff like go install this patch that we wrote, or the other thing he did was he was a lot of the stuff he did aside from writing like custom line of business applications was just like IT department for
Yeah.
hire, right? So
Mhm.
like install Windows, set up printers, stuff like that. So I got my fill of that stuff.
Yeah, no, like there was the school IT guy. I'm guessing he was the IT guy for probably of a similar job that this dude was. Like he would just go to different schools and like just make sure their windows were up to date and make sure, there wasn't absurd amounts of inappropriate material on the network computers and things like that, right?
Right.
And I remember like whenever he would come by, like I would just hang out with him like in the server room. Like he would just be sitting there working and just chatting with me and talking about tech and stuff. Um, and like I realized really quickly, like this is far more interesting than like a lot of other stuff, right? And my first thing that I started, I like my first language was HTML, which isn't really a language, but like I remember like the first time like in Notepad because Notepad, right? And
Hmm.
like you actually save it and you open in a browser and it shows stuff like that. Immediately was like okay, nothing else. And my parents were very much like, okay, that's fine. We got a computer on layaway, and it was in the living room. And very, very quickly, my dad was like, just put the computer in your room. Just put it in your room. Which,
Yeah.
giving full access to a computer to a teenage boy was probably not the best decision my parents ever made, but I didn't get in trouble. Um, I didn't get, nobody knocked on my door.
Yeah.
But
We
yeah,
Well, I didn't have any occurrences of getting in trouble, and my background with computers, I think, was pretty similar. We didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. I was an only child. My dad had a lot of health problems, and my mom supported us. Um, and I can't even remember if there was an occasion attached to it or not, but I remember it was kind of a big deal. My folks
yeah.
had saved and had financed the rest of this. I mean, by the time I got it, it was probably 5 years old. It was like
Oh, sure.
yeah, it was like an 8 megahertz with 640K of RAM, little like 6-inch screen built into it,
Oh, wow.
and I did have my it was a Sanyo. I forget the model, but it's basically this. They called it a luggable PC. It folds up into a portable
Yeah, right.
computer, which by portable they mean 40-pound suitcase, right?
Yeah, right.
And
Portable for bodybuilders,
right,
right?
exactly. And I had the deluxe model. I had the 20 megabyte hard drive, but I
Oh, wow.
mean it was still only 20 megabytes, hence the PK zip and batch file
Yeah.
solution. But yeah, so that computer, I can remember taking that machine to my grandma's that year when we went to celebrate Christmas. And I can remember my mom and dad are upstairs hanging out with grandma and grandpa, and I'm just down in grandma and
Yeah.
grandpa's basement hacking on my computer.
Yeah. No, yeah, like so my first computer was an HP Pavilion. Like, this was probably in the early 2000s. I'm a little bit younger than you are.
Hmm.
So I actually got like a proper desktop computer with a 40-pound monitor. Um, and I remember vividly telling my parents to not be on the phone during particular hours so I could torrent download Star Wars Jedi Academy
Oh,
on dial up. I
yeah,
I don't even remember how long it took, but I
it would have
remember.
taken days.
Oh no, like it was weeks. Like because I couldn't do it during the day because it locks your phone line. We didn't have another phone line. But like downloading something like 30K and it's games weren't huge back then, but they were definitely big. But I remember how satisfying it was to play that game like on the lowest graphics setting because it was a crappy computer. I was just like, yes, this is so
So
awesome.
my folks, and I am older than you, by the way,
Yeah,
because you're talking Jedi Academy, and I can remember the very first game in that series, Dark Forces, that
yeah,
came out when I was a
mhm,
senior in high school, and I
yeah,
was I was oh god, did I play the heck out of that? Um, and there was another point you made in there that I completely lost the thread. Oh, the modem.
Phone
You're
line.
telling
Yeah.
folks to stay off the phone. We had that argument in my house enough that my folks finally gave up and got a
Yeah.
second phone line.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, like my dad considered it, but he and I came to an agreement where it was just like, okay, like both my parents like they didn't go outside the house for work. My dad is an injured federal employee, so he's on workers' compensation, and my mom is on Social Security. So like they never left the house very much, and my dad was very much like, okay, if I need to like just make sure during the day if I need to make a phone call or I need to get a phone call um, that's there. But like the second from you get home from school, like we'll just figure it out.
Hmm.
And so my parents were very patient with that because they knew, and like the fact that I took it apart like day one, and my dad's like, "Can you please put this back together?" And we just spent I don't know $700 on it or whatever.
That I can remember the very first time I ever took the computer apart, and I wasn't even doing. No, I take it back. I was going to say I wasn't even doing anything to it. I think it was just exploratory surgery. It was
Yeah.
kind of exploratory surgery. I was looking to see if I could upgrade the graphics adapter because
Mm.
it was CGA graphics, which if folks aren't familiar, CGA graphics at the time it was only 4 colors in graphics mode,
Oh,
which
okay.
for a young man who was interested in computer games, that was not going to cut it.
Sure, sure, sure. No, it's yeah, no, it's quite funny because I remember taking it apart and kind of having an understanding of how to put it back together, but it was very much just like I think this goes here. I was very fortunate that I just didn't brick the motherboard because
Hmm.
those things back in the day were very fragile, right?
So my yes, and my first computer, the Sanyo one that I performed exploratory surgery on, that one as kind of one unit. I never really could do much with it as far as upgrading or taking it apart or anything like
Sure.
that. But the my next machine, when my former mentor took me on as an apprentice, he basically just handed me a box of spare parts. He said, here's your developer PC. Have fun with that. So that was my introduction to PC building. And I can remember. So that, again, this is I don't remember if I don't know when like years, but I can remember like having to fight like my sound card or whatever, trying to figure out like the IRQ and DMA settings that would work and not conflict with like my parallel port card and my
Yeah.
serial port card. This was I can remember when Plug and Play came out. A lot of IT people were like, no, 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 that's Plug and Pray. No, Plug and Play is a good thing.
Plug and
Trust
pray.
me on this.
Yeah, so I apologize. I'm flipping with my camera because I'm too low. I feel like I'm in a low chair. But I think it's one of the things that's really funny too about like people think that you're some sort of wizard. Like if you can take apart something and put it back together. Like um, I'm a middle child. My older brother is way older than me. My younger brother's a couple years younger than me. But like all of us have like this inclination to just like rip stuff apart and just pray you can figure it out. I remember my older brother when I was younger, like he definitely would take apart remote control cars and then like, somehow adhere them to toys of mine and then just drive like dinosaurs around on wheels. And I thought that
Mhm.
I was like the most brilliant thing ever. Um,
I have as a father, I can imagine the pain you must have put your parents through, you and your siblings. I have 3 boys.
yeah.
Luckily, I only have one who likes to take things apart. Um, and and generally he can put them back together. He actually he's my oldest one. He turns 16 in December, and he likes to get like broken phones off of eBay and repair
Oh,
them
wow,
for a
that's fun.
profit.
That's fun.
So
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think it's it's so as so I have a five well he's gonna turn 5 next month and then a 3-year-old who just turned 3. And the 5-year-old is like a month and a half ago, like he was always like kind of into building stuff, but he got into Legos like a month and a half ago. Like into Legos. And now it's just like anything that any like if he has a minute of free time, like he wakes up in the morning, plays with Legos before he goes to school, and it's like having to grab him by like the back of the collar and just drag him out because he just wants to build Legos. And like
So,
that's definitely from me for sure.
so have the soles of your feet been introduced to the joy that is walking on Legos yet?
I mean, we have very strict rules in the household. Like Legos can only stay in his room or the kids' room or the playroom
That's
because
probably wise.
I told him that my wife and I, a lot of parents might not agree with this methodology of parenting, but we definitely do that. If you leave it out, it's going to Goodwill, and we'll put it in the car and take the kids to Goodwill and put it in the basket and everything.
Hmm.
We only had to do that a couple of times with toys they really liked before they kind of learned to listen. I mean, some parents might think that that's archaic, but my house isn't super messy, but like if the kids had their way, it would be horrible.
Look,
So,
one father to another. Anybody who criticizes your parenting technique just doesn't know your kids, and I say that
yeah.
is like unique to everybody. Every kid's unique, so every parent has to be unique, and
Oh, for sure. And I think one of the hard things that it's like, so he has some friends that I don't want to say they're spoiled, but like let's just acknowledge the fact that like every week it's a new thing they got, and um, our kids are definitely spoiled. Like, don't get me wrong, like we spoil our kids, and their grandparents spoil the kids and all of that. But like, we try to, I guess, bring them back down to earth by saying like, look, all this stuff can just go away. And
hmm.
I'm a bit of a sociopath, so like I like it a little bit. I like the fact that like I can just ruin their day at any time. I think uh, that's a personal trait that I have to deal with myself. But um, like one story I remember, this has nothing to do with open source, but we're just having a great conversation with my friend Cam. Um, so my son is very much into music, and he had a drum set. He got a very loud, annoying plastic drum set from a friend, and he played it basically till it was broken. And my
Hmm.
wife and I decided to buy him an also crappy plastic drum set, but a little bit more robust.
Hmm.
So we bought that, and we were going to surprise him. And my wife went upstairs to go get it. And my way of surprising the kid was to break his old drum set in front of him before he saw the new one. So for anybody that's paying attention, like Isaac has something wrong with him. The look on his face when he's just like, "Why are you breaking my drum set?" And then he gets the new one, he's super excited, and my wife is like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, it was so satisfying. It was it was so satisfying. Um, yeah. Anyway, less about Isaac torturing his children. Like one of the things that
I
go
have a
ahead.
feeling. I have a feeling that this conversation could stretch into hours and be a stream of
Oh,
its own.
oh, for sure. Like my wife and I have had conversations, and the only reason why we haven't done it is one, we're lazy. Two, there's enough of them. We were thinking about doing like a bad parents podcast, where basically we just talk about ways that we raise our kids that people would probably disagree with. Look, we're not terrible parents, but we parent a way that a lot of people probably don't agree with.
Well, well, so do I, honestly, and I'll throw this out here. Um, uh, I was actually when I was at this conference, Code Palooza in Kentucky. Well, it's a long, drawn out story, but the short version is my oldest kid is on the autism spectrum and has had behavioral issues at
Sure.
school for
Yep.
his entire school career, and he ended up actually getting in trouble at school for something that was not his
Hmm.
fault. Should not be something you yell at a kid at.
Yeah.
Even he was imitating a movie basically to try and break the ice with some friends. And one kid took it the wrong way and went home and told mom. And the next thing we know, mom is calling principals
Yeah.
so we ended up after 10 years of fighting the school on all things regarding our autistic kid, we finally said, you know what, this is not healthy for us. This is not healthy for him. This is not healthy for our other two. And we just started homeschooling our kids. We
Sure.
just pulled them out.
Yeah. I mean, they're like, I don't want to get into this because I have my own personal beliefs on that. That probably is very similar to yours. I just don't want to rant. But I do think now in the current climate, like I think that especially now that like they're expecting children to, um, social distance learning. You can't put like a 5-year-old in front of a computer all day. So
Hmm.
like I think that we're going to see a wave of people that are just like, you know what, like this COVID thing, like who knows, and we're just gonna homeschool our kids for a couple years. Um, so I definitely think that homeschooling is an interesting option for people that if they can make it work with their work and life schedules. Um, but yeah, like I definitely think if your kid is struggling anywhere, like your responsibility as a parent is to get them out of that situation.
Well, and to bring this back around to like the coffee and open source discussion,
Sure, sure, sure.
so
Let's
seriously,
please talk about coffee and open source.
but
You can tell Cam and I are friends because we're just talking like nobody's here. But yeah,
but no, seriously, the thing that I wrestled with as a parent in giving up, the traditional school is, I was brought up again. I was brought up, in the middle of nowhere, not a lot of opportunities, relatively impoverished, and my parents drove it into my head. You got to go to school. You got to do well in school. You got to get scholarships. You got to go to college on those scholarships and get a degree and become a professional. And what's been really hard for me as a parent is letting go of all that with my kids, right?
yeah,
Okay, so I don't know what the future looks like. I am pointing them toward college. Hopefully, they will
yeah,
be prepared for college, but I don't know what it looks like. And working at Microsoft has been eye-opening for me in understanding that that's not going to be a detriment to them
yeah,
if they don't want it to be. I work with so I could there's one person on my team I can think of. There's one person on the .NET Core compiler team I know of, and I think I've probably met a couple other people in Microsoft that are actually legit high school dropouts,
yeah,
right? And have no further education beyond that.
yeah.
So.
I mean, like I think one thing that I find very interesting about tech is that like sometimes people that are very into tech, like they just don't fit into traditional school. You know, like they don't care as much. Like it's not even about that they're not smart or they're not like it's just a lack of interest, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that I find very interesting is I'm somebody who's I didn't enjoy school, but I like learning. So
Mhm.
I think like also the delivery mechanism is challenging for some folks, right?
Right.
Um,
No, I would agree with that.
yeah. Anyway, coffee notes. So one of the things that I love talking with you about
Mhm.
is your house,
Okay.
right? For the people that don't know, Cam is a fan of home automation type things. I tell stories about Cam all the time, and people look at me like you have friends that are weird. I guess. Um,
Me?
yeah. Well, I mean, it's good to be weird.
I,
I
I I do I do let my freak flag fly.
Yeah. So, talk to me a little bit about, what you do with around home automation. We don't have to go into the whole thing 'cause you have talked about it ad nauseum. You probably enjoy it to an extent, but I'm more curious about like what started this path for you. Of like, you know, I'm a tinkerer, and now I just have to basically make my house basically an ongoing project forever.
That's a very good question. How did that start? Because I'm so immersed in it now. I don't even
Yeah.
remember how it started.
It was probably
Um,
something very silly like, "Hey, I want to do this one thing, and I don't want to like have to log into a computer every day to do it," right? Or something like that.
Maybe it was. I can remember. So when we moved into this house, um, uh, I, I I started taking. That's when I first started. We moved in this house in 2014. I started taking notice online of people doing cool stuff with home automation.
Yeah,
Of course, Alexa. And I'm reaching up to mute the one on the Echo on my desk before I say her name.
yeah, right. That's why I have a
Um,
headphone on because my Alexa just goes off, it's gone off like 5 times.
right. So I kind of had an interest in that Star Trek type experience of talking to your appliances and talking to your lights and talking to your music. And I purchased a SmartThings hub.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to remember what I automated with that thing first. I can't even remember. I know I put some sensors on like the front door and put some sensors on the back door, and maybe a light switch or two. Um, the If anybody has seen my talk on home automation, I do a demo where um, I have this scenario with the pantry door where the pantry door lights are open, or the pantry door is open and the lights are on rather in the pantry. It's a walk-in pantry. I remember that being a major pain point for me. I remember thinking, if only I could get these kids to turn off this light. And I think another concern that we had was my wife. She had like home security concerns, like wanting to make sure, like,
Mm.
not so much that the house was secure from the outside, but more that, oh, we remembered to close the door, we
Yeah.
remembered to
Yeah.
close the garage door, and things like that. So I started investing in sensors and smart switches and things like that to go along with my Smart Things hub. Um, and somewhere in there, I soured on Smart Things as a platform. And I don't want to throw shade on Smart Things. It's actually a great platform. But I soured on it a little bit with its remote execution model. They do a lot of the execution that happens in Smart Things is in the cloud.
Okay.
And at the time, my internet connection was a little unstable, so
Sure.
that was kind of problematic for me. So I looked at a Smart Things competitor called Hubitat. And Hubitat is basically, oh, we have the exact same programming model as Smart Things. So whatever you know about Smart Things, you can bring over to Habitat, more or less.
Sure.
But we're all local execution.
Yeah. Hmm.
All right, so that sounded great to me. So I went and bought it, and I realized that the API for this thing for the RESTful API for communicating with this thing was actually pretty dead simple.
Hmm.
So, and that was at that time that I started playing with this notion of, okay, well, I don't really like the Habitat slash Smart Things programming model anyway. It's in
Yeah.
this language called Groovy. Groovy's kind of like Java, kind of like Python. Like the what I say and is that Python and Java had an ugly baby, right? And
Sure.
that's Groovy.
Yeah.
Um, so I didn't really want to do anything with that. So I had this idea that I could just wrap my Habitat smart home hub, just wrap it in another software layer, another layer of abstraction written in .NET
Hmm.
that I could have complete control over. So that's kind of been my journey with home automation. Now my house is its own kind of project
Yeah.
on its own. In fact, if anybody goes out to my GitHub and to the Puppet project, there is a branch on that project that I use for my automations, the automation specific to my house.
Yeah.
There's no like security information in there or whatever, so you're not going to be able to use it to break into my house. But if anybody's interested in seeing what kind of stuff I automate in my
Sure.
house, that would be a place to
Yeah.
look.
Cool. No, that's like so between like I've talked to you about Puppet a few times, right? Like the concept of home automation is very interesting to me, but I've never owned a house, so I've never wanted to invest in it. Um, and my wife, I think that's like she really wants to own a house, and I'm not as keen on it for reasons. Um, but one of the things that she is very terrified of is if we do buy a house, Isaac is going to get to do whatever he wants with it. And just the fact, like, so I don't have a ton of stuff. Like, I have a Raspberry Pi downstairs that's a magic mirror. My wife actually uses it to do her makeup and stuff because I can remotely turn on and off the display, and it's a magic mirror, right? So it's got
Hmm.
all that stupid stuff. But also I have Presence Light running on it, which people would probably know. Presence Light is my Teams broadcasting to light bulbs. So Presence Light runs on that, and that's controlled. I can control it by Alexa, or I have a Stream Deck button to control it. Um,
I
and then
still want to. I still want to connect Puppet to Presence Light at some
yeah,
time. I just haven't had the time to sit down and do it.
we'll figure it out. And then I also have another Raspberry Pi that I have Pi-hole running on as like a DNS block.
Hmm.
And that's about it.
So did you know that you can run Pi-hole in a container?
I do. I think it actually runs in a container. So, like by default, like you when you set it up, you can actually say run this as a container. And the reason why you run as a container is then you can set up like VPN and stuff to it.
Right. So
Yeah.
so I have in my basement I have a little, like, I don't know, 1 gigahertz, 1.2 gigahertz quad core server. It's
Yeah.
not like a horsepower server. It's more
Sure.
like a NAS server.
Yep.
But I've got Ubuntu running on that
Hmm.
with Docker and Pi-hole in a container right next to OpenVPN in a
Yep.
container, so that when I'm out and about, I can open VPN back home and go through Pi-hole and have an ad-free experience.
Yeah, no, like that's awesome. Like I'm all for that. I had so I did I used Pi-hole like about a year ago, and I ruined myself because the like I said messed up my blacklist and whitelist, and basically my wife was like, "Get this off of our network," because like it was a bad experience because some devices worked fine for one website, but the other device didn't because of I'm guessing user agents or something. But
Hmm.
yeah, so now I have Pi-hole running, but I only have like devices I care about pointed to it.
Right.
I get an ad free experience. My wife gets a Isaac free experience, which is probably good. And just to kind of build off on one of the things that you mentioned, so folks may know this, but I work in the event space at Microsoft. So we recently just did Ignite in September of 2020 for people in the future. And we did kind of a similar thing to probably what you did. We called it Chores IoT, which basically like Scott Hanselman, our friend, was like, these kids need to take out the darn garbage. So we hooked up a Raspberry Pi with a proximity sensor and sent him a text message when the garbage was too high, or sent his kids a text message. And similar thing, right? Where it's like you take like this simple concept. It's like, can you please flush the toilet? Can you please take out the garbage? And you're basically you turn it into like you build something to nag because
Right.
people
No.
for whatever reason don't kids are kids, right?
Yeah, I'm parenting smarter, not harder.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's so. I know also, so Puppet is one of your children as it pertains to your automation stuff. But the one that I always love telling people about is your grill, right?
Hmm.
I have a friend.
Inferno.
Yeah, I have a friend in my neighborhood who is he's a pretty avid smoker. I think he has a Traeger grill as well. And I was just talking to him, and I was like, he's an engineer, like a mechanical engineer. So I was just talking to him about how, obviously, let's take a break. Cam, tell us about Inferno.
So Inferno is my other project. So if again, if you go to my GitHub, github.com/Cam Soper, I have, God, I think I have like 70 some odd repositories, which is like it's not like a huge number of repositories, but some of which are my projects and some of which are things that I've forked over the years. I think like most everybody. And the two projects that are my babies, the first one is Puppet that we've been talking about. The other one is Inferno. And Inferno came about because I was at Costco one day and I'm minding my own business. And you know how Costco has like the traveling sales people who come at various times throughout the year to hawk whatever they're selling from their
Yep.
distributor. And the Traeger salesman somehow knew that I had a $300 rebate certificate in my pocket.
Somehow new.
Somehow he could smell it. And he gave me his best sales pitch, and I walked away with a Traeger.
Hmm.
I walked
Not
away
a
with the
bad
small.
purchase, by the way. Not a
No,
bad
it's
purchase.
not. Yeah, I bought the smallest one. I bought the Junior 20, so it doesn't fit a whole lot on there. But one of the problems I think with a smaller Traeger is that it's very easy for the thermostat in it to overshoot the temperature mark. So these grills are wood pellet smokers. So there's no gas or charcoal involved. What there is there's an igniter and it lights a fire in the wood pellets basically, and basically just burns a little fire in a little fire pot. And there's a thermostat that controls the when we add more wood pellets to the fire. With a very small smoker like that, there ends up being a tendency to overshoot the mark because there's a lag in time between when the thermostat trips and starts adding pellets and when the fire eventually catches up
Hmm.
and consumes the pellets and heats the chamber up. So this is a problem if you're barbecuing because barbecuing is all about low, slow temperatures. You don't want to overshoot because that dries your food out. Um,
And also, you have to sit at the same temperature the entire time, right? It going up
mhm.
and down like 4 or 5 degrees every couple of minutes is not ideal.
Well, at 4 or 5, I wouldn't worry about. 40 or 50, that's more
Yeah.
worrisome. And that was really what I was experiencing with my Traeger out of the box. So I did a little bit of research, and I'm not an engineer actually by education. My education is actually in communication, believe it or not. There was a
I
time
can
period
believe
we
it.
were. well, we were talking about like my history. There was a
Yeah.
time period in there where I was like running away from computers as a career. I don't know
Oh,
why, but I was doing it. Yeah, I was actually running toward law enforcement of all things. uh, and at some point I decided, yeah, I think I'd rather stick with what I know, and
sure.
I ultimately I'm glad I did. But um the uh, I had never the solving this problem required something called a proportional integral derivative controller, and I did not know this term PID. All the engineer people who are watching your stream are nodding their heads, going, "Yep, I know all about
Yeah, sure.
PID." I did not, and I didn't know anything about the calculus. I didn't know anything about it. So I had determined that this is what I needed, and I started shopping for off-the-shelf PID controllers. They are a thing.
Okay.
They are about $200 each, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to spend that much money. And then I saw a website where some person had set up. That had built their own PID controller for their Traeger with a Raspberry Pi, but they had done written all the code in Python, and looking at the code, I really wasn't. Um, it, for one, I don't like Python. I'll just throw it out there. I know Python is a great beginner language, yada yada yada. I don't like Python. I am a .NET person. I think
Sure.
.NET is everything I could want it to be, and I would much rather be really 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 good at .NET than be mediocre at like 18 languages. So
Yeah. No, I
so
understand. I'm in the same boat. Yeah.
right. So I decided, okay, so he has this solution. I'm going to do it my way, and I was inspired by his design. I didn't rip it off wholesale. Yeah, he used a different what they call analog to digital controller for taking the heat measurements. He did a few things differently in how he built his. He had some cloud dependencies on his. I actually have no cloud dependencies on mine unless you want to use the bot to control it, and then
Yeah.
that's another story. Um, and and really, I think set out to build it in a much more structured way with like
Sure.
dependency injection and things like that,
Yep.
rather than just like a bunch of PHP scripts
Yep.
or Python scripts rather. And yeah, next thing I know, I did borrow his math because, like I said, I don't know the
Yeah.
calculus, so I
I
borrowed
mean,
his
there's no
math
reason.
around
There's no
PID.
reason to redo math, right? It's
Right.
pretty. It's pretty static. Um,
And what we have now is a smoker that has a proportional integral derivative controller, which means rather than just being a dumb thermostat that runs heat pellets in until the temperature, the set point is reached, it now pushes pellets in at a continually decreasing rate the closer it gets to the set point. Your PID, for people who aren't familiar with PID, it's a very well-known algorithm in engineering. It's used like you use it every day, probably in your cruise control in your car. Things like sliding doors will use it, automated sliding doors, because you don't want the door to just fly open at full
yeah.
speed. You want it to slow down as it gets more, closer to the
Yeah.
fully open position. Robots, people who are big into robotics, they understand PID. So this was my application. So it's kind of the thing that I like to show off is, hey, I have a not just like, can I get on it with Wi-Fi, not just a Wi-Fi enabled grill, but like I have like the source code to it, and I talk
Yeah.
to it in SSH, and I have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. No, and it like like if you haven't seen the demo, I think you did a demo on the on.net show that's on YouTube, right?
Mhm.
So he didn't do it
So
with the
so
actual
so
grill. He did it with a butane lighter and a thermostat, but like the concept is still the same, right?
right, yeah. So it is a difficult one to demo. I've played with the how. Okay, how do I take this to a conference? How do I make a conference talk around this thing? Because what for me, the killer feature of any conference talk has to be the demo, right?
Oh, of course.
If I'm not going to do a conference talk if I'm not going to do a demo where at least somebody's jaw hits the floor. That's just like my thing. That's my whole reason for doing it.
Sure.
And
Yeah. You want people to call you a liar, basically. Yeah. No,
right,
I have
yes.
the exact same thing where I have to basically convince people that this is magic, right? Yeah.
hmm
Continue. Yeah.
and I have yet to figure out how to do an effective smoker talk without the smoker, but I can't
Oh, sure.
exactly haul it off to conferences with me. So I'll be working on figuring that one out. But while conferences are not actually a thing, although the stream that I'm on with Scott Addy and David Pine, the .NET Docs show, if you go to our website, .NETDocs.dev, in the archived shows, like way back, like our fourth or fifth show, we didn't have a guest, so they just had me talk about Inferno for the whole hour, and I did demo it live because we're at my house, so I had a camera set up pointed at it. So if you could certainly watch the on.net episode, which is only like 15 minutes, and
Yeah.
that gives you kind of an overview of what it is and how it works, and the whys and what basically the same conversation we just had, but with
Yep.
with maybe looking at the code and looking at the pictures a little. But that episode of our stream, it's like a whole hour discussion where I review some of the code. I actually had what was I grilling that day? I forget what I had on the grill. I think it was probably ribs. Um, but like I like had it running with a camera pointed at it. I actually called it what did I call it? Called it like the smoker cam. Right. Let's take a look at the smoker cam, and I put like a little overlay in the in the lower right the whole episode.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant thing. One of the things I think that might be interesting is if you were to just record a time lapse video and have that kind of as a part of your demo, that might be interesting. Again, it's
Hmm.
not like a demo per se; it's more like a video of a demo, which a lot of people aren't fans of. But I do think that the grill itself is pretty interesting. I wonder if there's like mini grills like this big, like that you can grill like little smokies in or something like that.
You know, that's not a terrible idea for one of those. Well, for starters, Traeger makes a portable model for like camping, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So I wonder what I could do with one of those.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about literally buying something just to demo. Like the amount of stuff I have around here, like the reason why I have a green screen behind me is because my my shared office with my wife, even though like yeah, she doesn't want to come in here ever. It's just got so much junk in here. Like
Hmm.
when I say junk, I mean for people like you and me, not junk. For
Right.
people not like you and me, junk. So
And I know exactly what you mean about buying stuff just for demos. Like my Habitat hub, I have a second Habitat just for demos,
yeah,
just for showing off Puppet. Excuse me.
yeah, no, it's it. I think at the end of the day, what's very interesting about home automation in general is that people like you mentioned Star Trek, right?
Hmm.
Like, and the newer generation, like they see things like Iron Man with Jarvis, and they see basically like, and obviously around the house, everybody has these things that you can talk to, but there's a limit to what you can do with those. And for instance, like there's a lot of things that people are like, man, I wish I could just talk to something and it'll do something. Like I remember growing up, I don't even know if this is true. Like people told me, like I used to hear that Bill Gates, when he was CEO of Microsoft, probably still now, his house is completely wired with like a an assistant, right? I don't even know if this is true, but this is what
I, I had not.
I've heard by a
I,
rumor.
I've heard about the art gallery.
Yeah, yeah. The art gallery, if people don't know, is basically like rotating art gallery, right?
Yeah, I mean, the idea I don't think is particularly novel now, but at the time that he built the house, it was a very novel idea to have flat paneled screens all up and down this wall, right, or how series of walls, or I don't know. I've never been to his house. I wish.
Yet,
Um,
yet.
b-
Did you discuss it yet?
but anyway, yeah. So he has all these flat panels, and yeah, he just like, well, I feel like a Monet today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny now because you can buy though I think Samsung makes a TV. Well, it's not a TV. But like it basically is it's made to display art
Hmm.
in a realistic impression of what it would be like in a museum,
Hmm.
right? It's like I think it's called the frame. Um we have a mutual friend who bought one. Um and he says he loves it. Like it's great. But at the same time it's like $3,000 for it's a TV. Like let's compete, but like the screen and the lighting sets it up where it can like you can put Starry Night on there, or you can put Waves of Kanagawa, or like any of those like oh my goodness like really cliche pieces of art that people like recognize. You can put it on your wall at any time.
See, what I really wish they would eventually develop is like full color e-ink, right?
Yeah,
I mean, because right now e-ink, your options are like what, 3 colors, 4 colors? That's
yeah,
like as far as it goes.
yeah, yeah. No, it's funny because especially now everybody is so stuck in their house. Like if you can make your house as comfortable as possible, and I think a lot of people are kind of going to home automation. Like I had a friend that was having a conversation, so um, they were talking about how they've bought all this stuff, like to good cameras and microphones and mixers and like all this stuff that like people really don't need, but they feel like they need. And he was talking with Golnaz, who runs Channel 9. If people don't know Golnaz, and she basically was like, yeah, like a couple of months ago, like all these dads turned into audio engineers and video engineers, right? And it's like if you have disposable income, like one thing that I've basically turned into like I need to get this microphone and myself sounding as good as possible. Like at the end of the day, like without anything, it sounds fine. But
Right.
like, oh, if I could just tune it just a little bit, if I could get some background noise out, and I've like become obsessed with it.
I know your pain.
Yeah,
So I'm wearing a headset right now for this discussion, and this headset is the best mic I have, which is
yeah,
actually concerning to me because I have mics that are supposed to be better, and I keep
yeah,
trying them, and but yeah, it was really the pandemic. I think took really, I think, put folks like you and me in a bit of a bind, because we kind of we really enjoy like going out and
yeah,
sharing what we're doing
yeah,
and learning what other people are doing, and talking at conferences and things like that, and all of a sudden we can't. There are
no,
no conferences.
yeah,
So yeah, I think the explosion of tech streamers over the past 6 months or so
oh
has
yeah,
been something to behold. Myself included in that wave, you included. And I think it's really cool. I think it's necessity is the mother of invention, right? And I hope this new emphasis on streaming stays
yeah,
going forward, because it's been for at least in my experience with the .NET Doc Show has been uh, extremely rewarding, with
yeah.
and honestly less exhausting than running to conferences every couple of months too.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I'll be completely clear. Like, I will get like max like 7 to 10 viewers during a stream, right? And I don't care. Like, it's funny because I've had these conversations with all these really great people that like I probably would have never talked to in this capacity, right? Like, I talked to Ian Lance Taylor, who's one of the designers of Go. I've talked to Claire Novotny, runs the .NET Foundation. I talk to Claire all the time, but like it's good to talk in that context, right? I'm
Hmm.
talking to Tracy Lee in a couple of weeks, right? Like I would never talk to Tracy.
We
Uh,
had one
yeah,
on our show. We had John Skeet a few weeks ago.
yeah, that was probably
And
pretty fun.
well, it was so the whole point of the episode, the whole theme of the episode was, here's our website that David Pine did most of the work on, actually
Hmm.
almost all of the work on.
Yeah,
Here's our website, fix our date time bugs.
yeah, no. So it's very funny because I actually opened a daytime bug and I tried to fix it. Like I just tried to fix it really quick, and David was like, "Nope, this doesn't work." I'm like, "Okay, close pull request." Like I don't care. But like one of the issues that I saw is like everything was like time and then in parentheses central time, and I'm like, you can't make that local time, man.
Right.
But yeah, no, like I'd imagine that's enough. Back to our conversation about people that you have no business having conversations with. Like, I've talked to John Skeet once, and he's probably one of the nicest people of all time. And it's just like can't imagine the world I live in where I can have a conversation with someone like John Skeet, like or Bill
Well,
Wagner.
yeah, well,
Like,
it's lost on me. You were about to say, I was about to say Bill Wagner right when you
yeah,
did. It's lost on me that I am on the same team as Bill Wagner, right? That
yeah,
I am in meetings with Bill Wagner multiple times a week.
yeah,
And to me, it's like, oh, hey, Bill, how you doing? And I have no problem hitting up Bill for anything. I can hit him up for anything on Teams, and I realize that a lot of people would be like,
yeah. No, of course. Like, it's one of those things. Like, again, not to stroke the ego of how cool our jobs are, but it's like you don't really appreciate. Like after a while, like at least for me, I thought that it was gonna rub off. Like, like people like Scott Hanselman will send me an IM, and
Hmm.
the first couple of times I'm like, and like my wife was like, "Oh, is Scott talking to you?" Because she knows, right? Like when I first started working with Scott a lot, and I was like, "This is honey, like this is like the guy. This is the guy." And she's like, "But he's a person, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, but he's the guy."
I had a moment like I know you're getting near the end of your time box here,
We have
but
we have we have no time box. We can just
uh,
chat. I just know typically like an hour is good, but literally we can talk for like 4 hours if you wanted to.
well, so just to relate a story,
Yeah.
when David and Scott, Addy, and I started doing the .NET Doc Show, we were doing
Mhm.
it kind of as an unofficial thing. We didn't really have a
Yeah.
lot of buy-in from our management,
Yep.
and you know, a lot of times it's just easier to
Just
ask
do it.
forgiveness than
Yeah.
permission,
Just
right?
do it. This is a
And
just
so,
this coffee and open source is a just do it. Like I'm
right.
not representing Microsoft at all, but yeah. Sorry, I don't know.
S-
Just continue.
so we had done it as kind of an unofficial thing, and one Friday evening after the you know, after I had shut down the computer and everything, I'm sitting in the basement enjoying my Friday night intoxicants, and and I look down and my phone starts ringing. I'm like, okay, who's calling me? I don't know about you, Isaac, but I'm, you know, the very first impulse I have is, why are you calling me? Go away, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And and I look down and it says Scott Hanselman calling. I'm, what the
Yeah.
heck is
Yeah.
this? And it turns out he was calling. He was actually, I didn't realize this because I didn't have my notifications turned on. He was in a chat with Scott and David and had just
Mhm.
decided, well, let's go video. And
Yep.
I had
Yeah.
not seen the chat messages, but I was still in the
Yeah.
room. So that's
Yeah,
why
yeah.
we started ringing when it went video. But that was a moment where I'm like, okay, what is going on here? Why is Scott Hanselman calling
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, yeah. Even though you know him, right? You have a previous relationship with him, right? But it's still one of
Mhm.
those things. Yeah.
Well, that's what's weird is so I had known him at my employer here in Kansas City, the bank. I worked there for 7 years, and I don't know, probably about 4 or 5 of that was in online banking when he was
Yeah.
at that online banking company. In 2007, he left that company to come to Microsoft. A few months later, I left the bank to go to that company.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then a few years after that, I came to Microsoft. And
Yeah.
I emailed him because, like I said, I'd known him, you know, for years. And I said, "Hey, Scott, I'm at Microsoft," and he said, "Quit following me."
Yeah. That's the running joke is Cam has been stalking Scott Hanselman for like
Yeah, I say that I've made a career of stalking Scott
yeah,
Hanselman.
yeah. But no, it's so back to your. Anyway, I just want to make a comment about Scott. Scott has openly said, "If you're green, I'm calling you." So like he doesn't do like the IM where like, "Hey, can we chat?" He just does the call, which I mean that's fine. There was a little Twitter thread that Caitlin McKinnon and myself had about basically like Scott, you need to prepare us, right? Anyway, long story short, I think one of the things that's funny as well, like the live streaming thing you mentioned is it opens up an opportunity to have conversations um, that are kind of different, right?
Hmm.
Like I remember, you probably remember when Jeff Fritz started doing this, and people were like, "Okay, like that's cool." And I remember talking to him originally; he didn't have very much buy-in at all from his group, and I'm not going to talk for him, but he just wanted to do it because he saw an opportunity to meet people, and get the word out in a particular way, and now like he's like a mogul, right? Not like a
He is.
mogul, but he's a mogul. Yeah.
And within Microsoft, at least within like the .NET circles, anybody who wants to stream goes to Jeff and says, "Jeff, how does this? Give
Yeah.
me, teach me your wisdom." Which we did. The three of us went to Jeff, and David, Scott, and I went to Jeff, and he shared a lot of insight with us that was good for starting out. I will say one thing that Jeff does really well that we really we don't focus on quite as much. Jeff really focuses on the Twitch community, like
Yep.
the concept of Twitch as a
Audience
community.
participation. Yeah. Like the whole thing. Yeah.
Now with our stream, we focus more on getting. So we call it the hallway track, right? We want to recreate that experience that you have between sessions in the hallway at conferences,
Yes.
where you end up wandering into one of those half circles with some interesting person talking about something interesting they're doing.
Yep.
And I think that was kind of the niche that we found. I feel like the niche that you've found here with yours, Isaac, is like the Seinfeld driving
Oh,
what's that show
comedians and
called?
cars with coffee. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. No, like, I hope at some point, if this ever picks up, I hope I don't get like a cease and desist from Seinfeld. Well, if it came from Seinfeld, I would definitely appreciate it, but it wouldn't be from his attorneys. No, so I don't know if I've ever actually talked about the history of why I wanted to do this. Right. Um, I was actually having a conversation, funny enough, with Shohed Chowdhury. I don't know if you know Shahed.
Hmm.
Yes,
Actually, he's going to be on our show in December.
yeah, he's super awesome. But I was having a
Hmm.
conversation with him at, funny enough, I spoke at a user group in DC. That when I was living on the East Coast, I just happened to be in the area, and I was like, "Oh, let me go do a talk." And he's like, "Okay, cool." So I went, and I was talking to him, and he does this. He has this whole concept that he's built out, kind of centered around similar to coffee, right? Like the code.
Hmm.
I think it's called Code and Brew, or I can't remember exactly what it's called. But like I was talking to him, like I really like this code and coffee thing because it just kind of pairs very well like off in the mouth. Um,
Hmm.
and I was talking about both. I was like, why isn't there like any like content that's out there that's specifically about open source, right? Not trying to get deep into tech, not trying to get like trying to sell wares, just like talking with people about open source. And um, I tried to go through the Microsoft path to like, oh, could this be like a Channel 9 series or could this be like, and people were obviously like, okay, so how does this bring everything back to Azure? Because in the Microsoft world, full disclosure, if it's not Azure, like, thumbs down. Even like, not to discredit like the other services we sell, but like at the end of the day, the goal is to get people into Azure and all of our other services.
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, well, it's not like the goal isn't to pitch a particular thing that can go onto Azure. It's to learn more about people that have bigger influence of people that aren't familiar with Azure. And then subtly bring them into like because obviously if they follow me, they're gonna see Azure stuff. Like that was the goal, right? Like
Right.
a subliminal thing, right? It wasn't enough for folks, so I had a conversation with somebody else, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do it. So I started doing it. And even though it's not picked up yet, I don't care because it's fulfilling, and I get to have conversations with people that I typically would just wouldn't talk to. Not because I don't want to, but because like, okay, like, am I just gonna call someone out of the blue and have a conversation for an hour about something that I'm interested in, they're interested in, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Although
and
I will say that this conversation that you and I have had is very similar to other conversations that you and I have had
yeah,
just like randomly.
yeah, and that's the goal. And like one of the things that I've told every single person that has come on is like, there's no agenda. And people that when they do these interviews, like they're specifically, typically they're like, okay, so there's an agenda. Like I got to talk about this, and then maybe there's like a script to follow. Like I've done podcast interviews, like they're all like, okay, we're gonna talk about this, and then this, and then this. My approach, which works for me, but maybe not for others, is like I just want to talk with you. And if we start talking about how you got started, if we start talking about your kids, if we start talking about whatever, like all of it's
Clear,
great. I just
clearly,
want to,
this
yeah.
has been a wide-ranging conversation.
Yeah, I just want to talk with people that love open source and let the conversation go where it goes. Sometimes the conversation gets really technical and we talk about all sorts of crazy stuff, and sometimes it's just how developers work and how it ties back into open source and family and all that sort of stuff. And that's kind of the goal, right? It's not like I hate like sometimes I'll switch the stream from science and technology to like podcasts and discussions
Hmm.
because some of them are not technical, even though they technically are, but like people can watch them. And I think that's the goal, right? Is learning to like is meeting new people that are interesting.
Right.
But yeah,
Well,
that's the origin.
I'm glad you think I'm interesting, Isaac.
I mean, so Cam, let's be real. You are very interesting. Um, you, I don't want to again. I don't want to fluff your ego, but like, you're a friend of mine. I think the reason why I liked the idea of having you on the stream is because not just because you have open source background and you love open source, which I think is a requirement for people that are on the stream, but like you're a communicator. Like um, you said earlier that you had a degree in communications, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I took communications class in colleges, and there was I don't want to be there are people like Cam in classes that I had, right? There are people like Cam, and I that's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing either, but it's just a thing. Like you notice people that okay, they can just naturally talk, and like they might say things that are kind of against the grain, but they easily can deliver messages, which is something you could add.
The funny thing that is that this is a skill that I really only developed once I got into the professional world. Okay,
Yeah,
once I got into, like once I got at the bank and started like having to talk to managers and so forth and explaining how this online banking system works, because the you know the explaining how that works and how our development process works and explaining things like that. Um, the other thing that I did as a kid to make money, other than code and printers, was I was a jazz musician, right?
you didn't
So
even talk about your music stuff. Oh, okay. All right, continue.
well, and
Sorry. Yeah.
that we could probably go into. Would you honestly, if you want to have me on the show again, we could definitely
Oh,
do
we'll
that.
definitely have you on the show
Um,
again. That's you
so
can be a recurring guest for sure.
so anybody who catches our show, .NET Docs, the .NET Docs show, um, if you we so like the bumpers at the beginning that has like the little countdown timer, and like the bumper at the end that says, "Okay, see you, here
Yep.
our next episode is whoever." That music, I produced that, and at one time, I was actually performing on that with my electronic wind instrument. If there was a flugelhorn track and a flute track that we used, we quit using those because I don't actually have the performance license for that song I was playing, and YouTube's ML
Yeah, yeah.
automated thing was
Shut you
flagging
down.
it so we quit using that. But yeah, I was a bit of a jazz musician, and when I got up into the professional world, I really obviously spent less time with my sax and more time with my code, but I still had that itch to get in front of audiences and perform, right? And I just found basically a new instrument, right? Instead of a
Yeah.
sax, now my instrument's a laptop.
Yeah, it's quite funny because being in the speaker circuit, like which I am or was, and you are or was. Like there's two kinds of people that like do this, right? There are the people that um they love to do it, but they can't do the nerves. Like they get sick or they get shaky. I'm not going to name names, but there are some very prominent people that are speakers that I've seen them basically like hyperventilating like 15 minutes before their talks, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but like the second they get on stage, it clicks.
Hmm.
For me, and I don't know if you're the same way, but like I need to be in front of people. It feels like so
Hmm.
like I get anxious before I talk, not because I'm nervous, but because I want to start.
Hmm.
Um, and that's something that's bode well for me. Also, something that I'm very guilty of is I don't really script things out when I do talks. Like I do my demos and then I just talk in between them. And like if you've been to any conferences where I've done speaking engagements and you've seen me do the same talk, maybe for whatever reason you want to go to my talk twice, you'll notice that it's completely different. And the reason why is because I get very bored of doing like a very scripted thing over and over and over again,
Hmm.
and I feel like I'm not saying that I'm like the best improvisationist, or is that a word? Improviser. Improviser is the word. Not improvisationist because that's ridiculous.
I am a big proponent for making up your own terms.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I'm the best improviser, but I love the idea of literally just saying things that come out of my mouth, right?
Right.
Like without it having a script behind it. Like one of the things that I'd love to do with my kids is I'll basically take one of their songs. Like I do the Weird Al thing where I can hear like any song and just start making up words like while the song is playing and like actually like change the song. My kids think it's the most ridiculous thing ever. But like I'm not saying that I have improvisational skills, but that's just something that I like to do, and I think it bodes well for, especially when you're speaking, is because you want to engage with people, and I feel like if people hear a script, they're not engaged anymore.
And what I have found, the best talks that I've given are the ones that go off script because something
Hmm.
goes wrong. Right. I gave
Yeah.
um it was that thing you recruited me for. What did we call that? It was like a build or something this year. One of the conferences this year.
Oh,
You
the learn session. Yeah, at
Yes.
build. Yeah.
Yes, you asked me to moderate one of those, and um, I'm not sure why. I can't remember what the situation was, but there was some bug I was unaware of in Visual Studio with Azure Active Directory.
Mm,
It was like in the preview build that I had,
yeah.
and I couldn't get through it. I couldn't demo the thing for the attendees, so I ended up spending that entire session debugging what was going wrong with Visual Studio. And then later, I finally said, okay, well, instead of publishing with Visual Studio, forget this. We're going to publish with command line tools.
Yep.
And all the attendees were like, it's not what was on the description, but
Yeah.
thanks.
Well, it's funny because obviously since you're one of the speakers, and I'm guessing you probably saw the attendee evaluations, and I remember specifically, like I called out because for everybody that know, Cam had a really weird time zone. Like he did it like 2 a.m. his time or
Yeah, it
four.
was
Yeah.
because we were trying to reach the Asia
Yeah,
audience.
we were doing the AEST time zone, which is Australia, which includes China as well. Um, and like he got like out of all 40 sessions that we did for this entire thing, he had like the second most. Like, and he had great evaluation scores. And I was just like, that's very interesting. Not the evaluation scores, I get that, but like, why so many tuned in at that particular time? But anyway, I think it just goes back to we're trying to find different ways to get out to our audiences, what regardless of their size. So the live streaming, the technical shows, I'm noticing that it's funny because I've actually stopped blogging. I used to blog a lot, um, and not saying that blogging is bad or unneeded, but like I'd very much rather go on a stream and talk than do a blog. Maybe it's because I don't like writing. I don't like prose like you do.
That well,
Um,
that's yeah, that's
yeah,
that's what it is for me too. I would much prefer talking with an audience than writing to an audience.
yeah.
And it. I hopefully my boss isn't watching. No, I really hate writing. Uh,
I mean,
being a content
we
developer,
all can tell that you don't like writing. We all can
be
tell.
being a content developer,
Yeah,
I like, right, creating content, the like what Scott and I do, where we create these learn modules that
yeah.
people go and learn, that I like creating, getting out here and being with the community, being a bit of a evangelist, that I like. Writing prose, man, I think I would just rather pull out my own teeth. But I do it, and I do it really well. I'm a perfectionist, and Scott Addy is more of a perfectionist than I am, which always makes me feel kind of inadequate because he always edits my stuff with this really ruthless red pen.
Oh
But
man. Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but uh, yeah, this is this you and I are a lot alike like that though.
It's quite funny. Like you mentioned Scott and his Scott has a very particular skill, kind of like Liam Neeson. But yeah, I remember when I started contributing to Docs, I was very open with him because he was on the team at that point, and I was like, "Hey, like, I really want to contribute, but like, I've read the contribution guide, I've read the style guide and I don't know if I can follow this." He's like, "Don't worry." And I remember my first PR, which was for like a pretty big article. It was converting .NET or ASP.NET to .NET Core 2. And I
Hmm.
remember, like, it was, at the time, I think it was a pretty popular article. But I remember that, like, if you look at the article that I originally wrote and the article that ended up going out there, completely different. Not because my content was changed, but because Scott basically had to walk me through, nope, we don't use that word. We have to use this word. And Scott is very, very good at that. Super patient, which,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, people like Scott are completely necessary for sure. Like, otherwise, yeah. Anyway, hats off to Scott. Um,
Indeed.
so I think we're gonna wrap up, Cam. Like again, we're gonna have you on the show again. Like this is ridiculous. But I think I want to thank you for coming on. I know that um, you took time out of your work day, took time out of your life day to chat with us. And typically, what we do on this show is when we close out, we ask our guests if you can describe open source in one word. What would that word be?
Community.
Yeah, community is pretty spot on. I gotta think of a different question. People have answered community too many times. Community, collaboration, freedom. That's very um, on brand. No one's been negative yet. I'm hoping for somebody to be negative so we can have a conversation about it. But
No, I'm very community oriented. I enjoy contributing to the community. I enjoy taking community contributions. I enjoy talking with the community. And as we wind down here, just if any of your viewers, if this is their first introduction to me, go out, give me a follow on Twitter. You can find me pretty easily. Or also check out the stream that I co-host with Scott Addy and David Pine, and our additional co-hosts, Myra Wenzel and Cecil Phillip. So we're kind of the core three that started it, and then we decided to expand our hosting pool so we can like take days off
Yeah.
occasionally.
Thanks for the invite, by the way. I
I
appreciate it.
I didn't know you were interested. I
No, you can't defend. You can't. No, we're good. No, you're dead to me.
honestly, that's probably for the best. David Pine hates you, so.
I don't understand why David Pine hates me. I hope he watches this and he's like, God, every time.
For clarity, for people who may not be watching, David Pine does not actually hate anybody. It's not
No,
it's
no, no.
not
So,
within his capabilities.
so the running joke is David Pine is way too nice, and the running joke is that Isaac at times um, enjoys trolling people that are too nice. And what ends up coming of that is whenever he has conversations with David Pine, um, it always ends up being this bit. It's a bit, right?
Hmm.
I have to do this bit with David where I'm kind of a dick to him, and he's just very nice about it. And he's like, "Why do you hate him so much? Why do you?" And it's just like it's a bit. Like I love David, great guy, but it's just like I can't be in the same room with him without doing this bit, and it's disappointing because maybe we can actually have real conversations, but I can't because the bit is too important to me. Uh, and I'm guessing it's important to him too because he goes with it. Otherwise, he could just go, no, no, no. So
Yeah.
I think he enjoys it too for a bit. But yeah. Anyway, Cam, thank you so much for coming on Coffee and Open Source. We will have you again soon. And for everybody out there watching, enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe. Take care.